And we're live. Welcome back. Excited to have everyone back here today. My name is Russ, as you all know. I've got Bill with me, but also have a special guest with us.
Who's that?
Ruth. Ruth is joining us from CURO. Hi, Ruth, and welcome to Comp and Coffee.
Hi, Russ and Bill, and thanks for having me here.
We'd love to have you. Now, I do have an important question to ask, and this is really the only way we can start this off. Now, Ruth, as you know, this is Compensation and Coffee podcast.
I was going to go here.
Now, our listeners may not know this, but Ruth and our new friends at CURO, who just joined us here at Payscale, they are based actually in the UK, right? You guys have offices in Edinburgh. Did I pronounce that properly?
Yes, kind of. Yeah, Edinburgh. Yeah.
Close enough. And London. But here's the question. Bill and I are both enjoying coffee now. And I know it's a little later in the day there in London. Are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker, Ruth?
Definitely a coffee drinker. Yeah. So 2 coffees in the morning and then moving on to herbal tea to try and make myself feel good.
So at tea time, when is tea time again? Refresh our memory on that.
In the UK, normally around 4 in the afternoon.
Or whenever you can get to the golf course.
Tea and biscuit about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes.
Excellent. So you do drink tea then just to be social, but you're more of a coffee person. Understood.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Got it. Good to check. Now, we just dropped a lot of information, Bill, here. Ruth and her friends at CURO have joined the Payscale family. We are super excited about this. And we're very excited to have Ruth on the show today to talk a little bit. Ruth is a co-founder of CURO. And so we would love to chat with Ruth a little bit about how this whole CURO thing came to be, what you guys do over there, which is really pretty exciting stuff, and how it's going to all help out not only the Payscale family, but more importantly, our Payscale clients and the compensation community at large. So very excited to get started on this today. Ruth, I guess before we jump into this too much, how did you sort of get involved in founding CURO? Were you always did you just wake up as a young woman and decide, you know what's cool? Compensation. I'm going to do something about that. How did this whole thing start?
There's always a first.
Well, I guess prior to founding CURO, my career was really as an HR and reward specialist. So I worked across 3 continents. Traveling and working was always something that was really important for me because I'm a child of an expat, so travel was always in my blood. But I came back to London around the millennium. And at that point, I was leading compensation for a major US investment bank and oversaw the design at that point of an in-house compensation platform. And we built our own because we couldn't find what we wanted in the marketplace. And I guess you could say that's where the first seeds of CURO were sown.
Got it. So it was more of you could see that there wasn't a solution at the time, really.
Yeah. And also that period was very much, as you'll be aware, the advent of SaaS technology in the HR sphere. We started to see some, great new platforms coming out, things like 360-degree review platforms and flexible benefit platforms that was just starting to use SaaS technology. And I guess I found that quite intriguing. I found the flexibility of SaaS, the speed of SaaS, and of course the cost of SaaS as a delivery mechanism was really quite exciting. And I met Jerry O'Neill, who I co-founded the company with, who was the CEO of CURO, and he was running a flexible benefits business. And I was his customer, and we kind of got chatting. He sold his flexible benefits business, and then we decided to start CURO together. So that was really where it all started back in 2010.
Is there any magic to the name CURO?
Oh, well, it was a funny story is that Jerry's Flex Ben company was called VebNet. And he said, let me never name a company again that people ask me how to spell. And of course, everybody asks how to spell CURO. It was very much the product of branding folks. CURO means to administer or to take care of money in some cases. And so that was really where the name came from. But it's, gosh, never let me name a company again, I'd say.
So as you guys got together and you thought about, okay, we're going to start a sort of a SaaS solution for compensation, what were at that time, based on where the world was with comp management and how companies thought about compensation, what were sort of the founding principles of your first product? Like, what was the key feature you had to get out the door? In product management, we call this the MVP, right? What did you really want to get into the market as soon as possible back then?
Well, we launched just as the world was really reeling from its biggest financial crisis. So you'd probably say it wasn't a great time to start a business. But the fallout of that crisis was really, especially when it came to compensation, regulatory compliance and a demand for pay transparency. And I guess those two things became very much the focus of what we tried to do with our technology. So, making sure that you had strong pay governance and that you could control who was being paid what and who was approving it in line with many of the emerging regulations at the time. And then the whole furore of excessive bankers and executive pay really meant that stakeholders wanted to know much more how pay was linked to business success. So we tried to enable that through our platform as well.
That's actually an important thing, like the linking it and measuring it and tracking it. I think a lot of people out there listening are thinking, oh, wait, are we supposed to close the loop there? Are we supposed to make sure it worked? And I think go ahead.
Sorry, I think if you were to ask me today, have our principles changed? Well, not really, which maybe suggests that we haven't, managed to achieve them in the world of reward yet. So interesting thought. So.
Yeah. Was that one of the big sort of drivers as you guys sort of evolved the product, was like, how do we show the impact of taking the time to use the tool? I mean, every company that sells software, we want to show ROI of the tool, but you were really focused on trying to show ROI of getting more strategic in compensation and rolling out comp management to the organization, right?
Yeah, because there's two types of ROI, and most people will try and sell a compensation management platform around the sort of efficiency ROI and how many hours are you going to save and how much money that you'll save as a result of, the automation. But we really always try to focus on the strategic benefits. From really thinking about optimizing compensation spend. So every dollar that you spend in your organization on comp, you want to know that it's either driving business success or it's engaging employees.
Yes. And that's a huge, it's funny to think about that. As you're saying it, I'm thinking, well, most people focus on, how big is the compensation team or the HR team, but the cost of the entire team, fully loaded is nothing compared to all of the money they spend on the company's behalf in a year.
Absolutely.
Taken up probably almost literally an order of magnitude when you get into like banking, where you were, inspired at least to think about this. It's like the dollars make a huge difference. And
I've always said this too, Ruth, that you're preaching to the choir here, because I've always felt, you and I in the past have been speaking too on the idea of how important comp strategy is. And everyone talks about the importance of compensation relative to talent, retention and recruiting, but they always forget the other side of the equation, which is, the organization's EBITDA and profit margins, and your largest expense is payroll. And if proper comp management results in, even a 0.25% of improvement, less spend in payroll because you're getting it correct, think about the kind of money you're saved. So you can really justify the cost of your comp team and the cost of rolling out comp strategy and all that stuff. We really think about getting payroll correct, right?
Yeah. So that's what we, trying to do in the product is just try and put the information in the decision makers' hands around that, linking business outcomes to the pay that's being allocated. And so we kind of focused a lot on that in terms of the design of the product.
So awesome mission statement, sort of great, fundamentally, just especially that time period. I can imagine there were a lot of people sort of thinking about solving comp that way. When did you guys know at CURO that you sort of were onto something with this product? Was it when you landed your first real marquee client? Was there just getting client feedback? Sort of what kind of gave you guys the feeling that you were really doing something a little different?
Well, I think, we were lucky that this emerging theme of pay governance, regulatory compliance, our product really played into that story. So we got a lot of traction initially in both the FS sector and the legal sector. I think Clifford Chance was our first big client. And I think when you win a name like that, as a startup, particularly in the legal sector where, many of them will tend to follow each other in terms of deploying vendors, we really started to feel that was where we were starting to make traction and really put a footprint in the market.
Great.
Yes. Well, I was going to say, it's funny because we have a product, peer that does the, similar thing where it's actually a huge benefit for clients to follow their competitors into Payscale because, they're sharing data with like companies, so when you get a few hospitality hotel companies in, then others follow, and they all want to be in the same place. So it's good. And it's good to not stick with one, because then you become the compensation management company for the legal industry, or, you force yourself into a pigeonhole, which CURO did not do, which is great.
No, we kind of stayed agnostic to sector. Right. We just, I think really it was where anyone had complex compensation, or they had not necessarily complex compensation, but multiple different employee groups that they needed to manage. And that was where, we often succeeded and others didn't, I guess. So.
Yeah. And you guys, looking at the tool, it must have been very challenging. A couple different things I can imagine that you ran into sort of early, right? One is, you're based in the UK. So growing your market means going into Europe, which means all the complications that US-based companies can ignore for a while, like currencies and international rules and all those sorts of things. So you probably ran into that quick. And I can only imagine the different layers of complexities you found in types of compensation throughout Europe and that region. Was that one of the bigger challenges? Was figuring out how to keep the CURO comp management product flexible enough to handle all these different cases?
Yeah, because if you think about compensation, and we built a system to manage a process, and the actual compensation process is pretty much the same in any organization. You set the budget, you allocate the comp, you moderate the outcomes, you make sure they're all okay, and you send it off to payroll. So that's fairly, standard across organizations. But where the complexity comes in is the number of different plans, the number of different regulations, the number of different currencies, as you say. And so, building a solution that could handle that was really one of the challenges. And as our client base grew, we learned more, we realized we needed more flexibility. And that's been quite, a big challenge for us as we've gone through our journey and grown.
Exactly. And what, some of our listeners might be thinking, well, this sounds really interesting. I mean, comp management sounds like a really great product. I mean, it's the kind of tool that you can distribute directly to your management team, and they can actually review their compensation, send it back, go through a review cycle, all those sorts of things. It enforces the various, comp strategy rules that the organization might put in place around guidelines, but also rules that you can't break. If a client's thinking or listeners thinking to themselves right now, yeah, that's kind of cool, but I do some of that in my HRIS system today. What sort of differentiates what you guys built from just sort of using Excel spreadsheets or just going right into a HRIS system and filling out the information there?
Yeah, we are a standalone compensation provider. And I think, what we offer is the level of configurability. So, the flexibility, and that's configurability without coding. And I think that's, even amongst other standalone providers, that's how we differentiate our product is, we rebuilt the product about 4 years ago now. And really what that did was it meant that it took less time for our support, services staff to do the implementation. And it meant that our clients could own the systems more. So they were able to be more in control, which I know most compensation folks love being in control, and especially love using spreadsheets. And for them, the jump from spreadsheets to a system, they felt like they weren't in control. And we wanted to kind of give them back control, I guess.
I think that's critical, because the key to adoption and usage is, the control or the feeling like it works for you and it's easy, or, and I guess really easier than the alternative, which is in most cases the spreadsheets. And and
I think another feature that kind of differentiates us from, or one of the benefits we have of being standalone is our data architecture, for the product is optimized for compensation management. So if you think about running a compensation process and the hierarchy that you need to send those approvals through, during an annual merit review, that often bears no resemblance to the normal organizational approval hierarchy.
Right.
And the way you look at comp data during a merit review is often nothing like you look at it in a payroll or an HRIS system. But we don't care about that because we just bring the data in and we manage it in the way you need to manage it during a merit review. We're not hindered by an overall organizational hierarchy or a method of managing data that doesn't allow you to get to what you want quickly.
Right. And that's one of the things I think that, made this Payscale CURO like interaction and coming together great, because I mean both sides think the same way, and it's like our products are all built by compensation people for compensation people, which is sort of another way of saying what Ruth just said here. It's like it's not a generic system for managing all HR information. It is about comp, and the workflow is about comp, and that's why it's easy to adopt. That's why it's flexible, and that's why people like it, because it actually does do the things exactly the way a comp professional wants to see them. And so I think the CURO Payscale marriage is going to be great because both sides are doing that. So it's all going to come together, and we're going to get this full cycle of comp decision making and comp data all mapped together.
Exactly. I think one of the things that, and Ruth just hit on it there too, the idea that, comp folks using our tools from the Payscale side, they know what they need to have their managers do for pay cycle, but how do they communicate it? How do they enforce the rules? Right. How do they get it out there? And just looking at what CURO brings to the table in terms of like, you have everything at your fingertips you need as a manager, plus that comp conversation that we're always talking about, how important it is that the comp team have with the manager, is sort of facilitated by this. The information is at their fingertips, which is, I think, really pretty powerful. So that's the comp management product, but there's another product that you guys have been hard at work over there on too, that we're definitely also excited to be able to bring to everyone. And that's your pay equity offering, Ruth. And how did you guys sort of decide to add that on? What was sort of the thought process of, well, we've got a comp management solution now, let's take a good hard look at pay equity and how we can be impactful there. How did that whole thing start?
Well, I would say that the compensation planning tool has always been about fair pay. So that was part of the overall mission of what we were trying to achieve here. But then we, around 2017, we started to see the emergence of pay gap legislation in Europe, where I'm based, and we started to get clients coming to ask for us for help. We designed a specific tool to help with the gender pay gap reporting in the UK, which is a piece of legislation that employers over 250 with over 250 employees have to comply with. And we had many of our clients start to use that as a reporting tool. And then they were saying, okay, well, I'm looking at my pay gap in the UK, but I'm a global organization. What is my story globally? And can I use this, UK-based tool for that? And we were going, well, kind of, but why don't we create a new product? And so that was really what we did. Beginning of 2018, we really started looking at how we could create a product that would do a complete pay equity audit for organizations.
Great. And was the focus was mostly on the audit, just sort of helping organizations identify, because at that time, like, from your perspective, you're being CURO as an organization, what were folks getting right about pay equity and what were they kind of getting wrong?
Well, I'd say people were really only looking at this as a legal issue. So the traditional approach has been to pay equity to be very reactive. You only did a piece of pay equity analysis if someone brought a piece of litigation against you, if a claimant came to you. And most of us were too scared to do. I mean, when I was a reward comp practitioner, you never really wanted to do pay equity analysis because it could always end up discoverable in court, in a court proceedings. And I think, there's been a lot of focus on employee engagement and pay transparency. That story was starting to play out. And I think there's now, we've seen in the last 2 years, we've had this massive health crisis that has really laid bare many of the inequities in our societies and in our workplaces. We've seen massive social movements and, demands for stronger ESG from organizations. And so, all of a sudden, pay equity has really become this C-suite topic where organizations now need to be proactive about pay equity, and they need to prove their commitment to fair pay.
And how did you guys think about that's awesome. So it's really more about not just how do we protect ourselves, but how do we from the ground up really think about fairness and equity in everything related to compensation.
How do we do the right thing?
Yeah, how do we do the right thing, and literally how do we do it? Right? Like how do we go forward and do it?
Yeah, and I think the traditional approach had been really for people to outsource this. So this was outsourced either to legal or advisory firms, and it cost a lot of money. It was quite a slow process. It was something you probably did every 2 years, at the most. And the business world isn't like that anymore. The business world is too agile, and we now need pay equity to be something that's not done once every 2 years. It needs to be done on an ongoing basis. You need to be monitoring this on an ongoing basis. And when we spoke to many heads of reward, they wanted to own this process themselves. They wanted to, again, coming back to this control thing, they wanted to own the data themselves. And so we were like, okay, well, let's use technology. Let's enable the process. Let's give you back control and create a product that lets you do what you were outsourcing. And so that's really, what the whole story was about, I guess.
I mean, that's good because when you're looking at the data, I mean, I don't know if this is going to translate like across the Atlantic to you, but it's like a game of whack-a-mole. When you discover a problem in pay equity and you fix it, you solve that problem, and another one or two or three pop up, as either as a result of that or independent of it. And you have this complete,
because
it's a truly dynamic situation. And
absolutely, you draw a line in the sand. You do your pay equity audit. Then every time you hire someone, every time you promote someone, every time you do a pay review, all those decisions, pay equity just creeps back in again. And so, what we're really trying to do is build this concept of sustainable pay equity across the whole compensation cycle. And that's why CURO coming into the Payscale family really excites me, because, all of us together really work across that whole compensation cycle. So, let's make that a reality, I guess.
I think that's right. You brought up a couple things there, Ruth, that really just all of a sudden gelled for me as you were talking, right? The one was you mentioned how pay equity was largely outsourced, and you just have a third party come in and do an event-based analysis, right? But then also you mentioned all the things that kind of the pandemic and everything has laid bare. And one of those things is we've got to rapidly hire people, rapidly respond to changing demand and supply for skills and talent. And if that's happening, and you're constantly hire people and constantly just paying whatever it takes to get them in the door, and you don't have any kind of ongoing pay equity solution, the problem is just getting literally worse every day for your organization.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, in our traditional pay scale world, it's like the difference between using real-time data and a survey. It's like you hire a consultant to do pay equity audit. They're going to ask for data. The data they ask for is going to be, a little old when they get it. And then they're going to spend 6 months processing it. And then they're going to give you a report, which is, 9 to 12 months ago, saying, well, last year you had this problem, or these problems. And it's like, well, what's happened in the last, 9 to 12 months, and it's like, do it again. And monitoring, I think, is critical. And one thing I wanted to add to, when you were saying every time you do a promotion or a raise or, move people around, every time people leave, that can create a pay equity problem. And it's sort of, you want to be dynamically tracking what's going on and looking at things. And it's not about the average pay or the median pay, it's about each person's pay or each person's gap, each person's opportunity, like to get a little broad, their performance ratings, their promotion opportunities, the hiring, et cetera.
Yeah. And we brought in a recent feature, which is what we call our fair pay check, which is designed for recruiters to be able to use, or HR to be able to use, where they can, anytime they're doing a new hire, they can put in what group that person is going into, and it will show you the impact that person will have on the pay gap in that group, based on the hiring salary that you're intending to bring them in on. So you can check at those key trigger points in the talent life cycle, whether you're going to damage your pay equity position.
Yeah, I saw that feature and that blew me away, because basically, to Bill's point, it brings an individual, and it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Ruth, because I was just like, oh my goodness, it looks like it's meant to be sort of looked at whenever you're doing a promotion or a new hire, as you said. Mm-hmm. And then it brings that person up. It shows you, here's what we would recommend you. The system actually says, here's what we recommend you pay them based on market, everyone else in your organization, where they fall with these different factors, whatever you've chosen, ethnicity, gender, whatever the other factors you want to consider. And then it actually tells you, by doing this, how much it's going to improve or worsen your various equity gaps which I think is just brilliant. And I think it's a great example of how you guys started thinking about, how do we put in features so that organizations can build out ongoing processes to protect against both pay equity issues, but also treat people fairly.
Yeah, and I think that's really, a key driver, and that's what we're going to look to, now work with you, and the benchmarking, products, and to think about how we can continue to build that story of sustainable pay equity.
It's also I think people often miss this kind of thing. That's an education tool, or an education process too, because it just gets you thinking about it all the time, and you're aware of what's going on, and it brings it from the back of the mind to the front of the mind, so that managers and HR people and the managers, the line managers, are aware and thinking in terms of pay equity and fairness.
Yeah, what we've seen some of our clients do using both products, using pay equity and comp planning, is, making sure that actionable insight is really front of mind for managers. They've been set targets in terms of, the profile, the average, pay that needs, and how that needs to be allocated either against gender or against race and ethnicity, even how performance ratings should be allocated. And then ultimately, those managers' pay is going to be determined on whether they met those goals. So it's using the tools to really, hold the lens up here, right, and say, am I doing the right thing? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Well, we're going to tell you whether you're doing the right thing or not. And that's, again, something that we're really focused on.
I think that's just really powerful. I love this sort of how well and how nicely the CURO pay equity and comp management tools just sort of dovetail together. It seems like a natural fit. And that kind of leads us to, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on now being part of the Payscale family. I mean, what are, from your perspective on the CURO side of the pond, what would sort of be your thoughts on the opportunities here for both our organizations as CURO comes into, being able to be connected with all the tools we have here?
Well, I mean, we're very excited about being able to, provide our products to the Payscale client base. You have an amazing client base. And so, that just gives us the opportunity to prove further our commitment to pay equity by, not only increasing the number of employees we can impact, but the client base that we can access. So we're very excited about that. But also, I think you mentioned it before, either Russ or Bill, we are compensation focused people as well. So, kind of comp nerds. This is like the joining of comp nerds here. And personally, I love innovating with like-minded people. So that, is also something that's exciting me about our two companies coming together.
I have to say the phrase comp nerd sounds much better with a British accent.
It sounds more sophisticated.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like a compliment.
Yeah.
Comp geeks, comp nerds.
I like that.
I like nerd. I like
nerds. Yeah. Anyway, no, I think, it's, like a partnership or a merger, an acquisition there, is is a good thing when you start to hear like through the grapevine, like competitor feedback is like, oh no, like that's a great solution, putting all that stuff like under one umbrella, and having, pay market information management, compensation planning, and pay equity all together. And you've got this virtuous cycle, the holy grail of compensation all in one place. And it makes these point solutions look, challenged as to why people would do it. And, we're hearing from the client base, it's like, this is awesome. We would love to be able to do pay equity and comp planning within whatever Payscale product we have. And, and I'm sure that CURO clients are saying the same thing. It's like, oh, this is great, bringing in the market information, helping us,
absolutely. Because, we needed, before you can do any pay equity analysis, you need to have done the job leveling, piece of work. And that was something that we didn't have,
right.
in our portfolio.
Right.
And then obviously during any type of compensation analysis, you need the benchmarking data. And again, that wasn't something that we had. So now we've got it all under one roof, which is,
right.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah. And one implementation, maybe talking about futures a little bit.
Well, we're a little bit in the future, but that's what makes the future exciting, I think.
And Ruth likes innovating in the future.
Exactly. We're all going to be innovating. Well, I think what's awesome about, Ruth's whole story here today and everything she shared with us is really about how we've learned over the last, year and a half here of this crisis, how critical folding pay equity into comp management and thinking, forward thinking about compensation as a strategic element of your business is important. So it really highlights all the things CURO's built. At the same time, we've also learned in that same time period how that you need current comp market data, right? You need more current market data. And these are things that both Payscale and the Legacy Pay Factors organization brought as well.
Right.
And I think now having all these tools in the toolbox is just very exciting. And like you said, Ruth, I can't wait to get our comp nerd hats on and think through how we're going to do all this stuff. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. I'm thinking about all the future challenges as well. We've got, think about what's on the reward managers to-do list at the moment. So pay equity is obviously one of them, thinking about how to manage hybrid work, thinking about how to manage pay for skills. How do we then start to create solutions or evolve our solutions to meet those challenges so that we, can continue to support those working in those positions.
Exactly.
Oh, Ray, you just made my head hurt thinking about like, what are people going to do with, remote or hybrid work? And, here, at least in the US, you get the tech company saying they're going to, lower pay or adjust pay if people, move to lower price cities. And then what happens if you have, an ethnic or, gender group that tends to do that more than, another one, like women tend to work from home more than men. And then you get this whole other, you got this combination pay equity, remote work adjustment factor issue going on.
That's a whole other podcast, Bill, I feel.
Yes.
So that's a tradition here.
That's right.
I just babble senselessly about something that becomes another podcast.
I think what we just learned today is we're excited to have Ruth as part of the company.
Good
and
point.
We're going to need to have Ruth on this show again.
Yes. Unfortunately, she drinks coffee, so she's allowed.
She's allowed because she's a coffee drinker.
Back.
That's right. That's our first test. Although we'll allow folks from the UK on. They just have to drink coffee.
It's getting close to tea time.
Yeah, British people don't just drink tea. No, we do drink coffee.
Really? Oh, I see. These are stereotypes. Yes. And well, just to be fair, here in the Boston area, we don't just throw tea in the ocean. We also drink it.
Right. Oh, right. Okay. Got it.
So yes, that was my terrible, bad revolutionary joke. In any case, thank you for joining us today, Ruth. Really appreciate. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it. I know you got a million things going on over there. And if you're listening to this show and you're thinking, I have a bunch of ideas for Payscale now that they have their friends from CURO with them and all this stuff's there, I have great ideas of how they could bring it all together. Let us know what those great ideas are. Send us emails to coffee@payscale.com or reach out to us on Twitter @Payscale. We'll be happy to check that stuff out and share those things with you on the next episode. So thank you again, Ruth, and thank you everyone for joining us today on Comp and Coffee. Comp and Coffee is a Pay Factors production dedicated to the compensation community. We welcome your feedback.
Send email to coffee@payfactors.com, tweet us at payfactors, or share your thoughts in our Payfactors community tile. Until next time, keep your coffee hot and your data fresh.